Thank you for joining us for Beyond the Five Senses, How the Hidden Sensory Systems Shape Regulation, Behavior, and Learning with occupational therapist Nancy Marin. We all know about sight, hearing, taste, touch, and smell, but there are three other senses quietly working internally in the background. These shape how we move, how we feel, and how ready we are to focus and connect. They are so woven into our daily lives that most people don't even realize that they exist. Yet they can make a profound difference in how we feel calm, how we feel centered, or overwhelmed and out of sync. When these systems aren't working well, the brain and body burn extra energy just to get through the day. The constant drain can affect our focus, emotional balance, our behavior, and the ability to fully participate in life. Today, Nancy is going to help you see these sensory systems in an entirely new way. She'll show you how to recognize when they need extra support, when they can bring the nervous system back to balance, and she's going to share some real life stories of what changes when sensory needs are fully understood and addressed. Whether you're a parent, a therapist, or an educator, we'll leave you with insights and some practical ideas that you can start using right away. So I'm excited to welcome someone I do deeply admire, and both in her expertise and in her heart, Nancy Marin. Nancy is an occupational therapist and founder of Occuplay Inc. in Ponte Verde Beach, Florida, a pediatric clinic specializing in sensory processing and neurodevelopmental treatment for children and young adults with neurological differences. For over 40 years, she has blended movement-based therapy, sensory strategies, and family-centered care to help children regulate, to connect, and participate more fully in everyday life. She really has a gift for turning complex ideas into simple, practical steps that families and professionals can apply immediately. Nancy is a certified provider of the listening program and has integrated it into individualized sensory diets for nearly 2 decades. She also coaches families nationwide, so helping them with gains in the home and school, clinical settings, and in daily life. She holds advanced certifications in pediatric neurodevelopmental treatment, baby treatment, and integrative yoga therapy, and serves as an adjunct faculty member here at Advanced Brain Technologies. She's also a national educator who trains professionals in sensory and movement-based approaches grounded in respect, relationships, and whole child development. Nancy, we're so glad you're here.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute honor to be here. Do I really do all that?
You really do all that.
Thank
It's
you.
so great to have you. Nancy, I just want to dive in. We have so much to cover today. You've worked with thousands of individuals and families that you've supported over these years. When somebody's having a hard time focusing, managing emotions, participating in daily life, what do you look for first to understand what's happening underneath those behaviors?
Right. So with that being said, I want to just have everybody kind of close their eyes for just a moment and take a pause and know that we are sensory motor human beings. So I want you to just think about from your own internal being, what resonates with you? What stands out for you to help you get through the day? So just take a moment to think about the things that you utilize in your everyday world to help you manage all of the different things that you have to take care of throughout the day. And when you kind of have a good sense of what that is, you can feel free to open your eyes if they're not already. And so we can't separate sensory from motor and emotion and behavior. Like it's all intertwined so beautifully. And so in answer to your question, and if you think about the things that you personally utilize on a day-to-day basis, for me as an OT, when I first get that phone call from a parent, I do basically a parent intake on the phone, and then I send them a sensory motor checklist. No matter why they're calling me, whether it's for a fine motor issue, a gross motor issue, or a sensory issue, I have them complete a sensory motor checklist. It's not standardized, it's just a checklist that covers all 8 sensory systems. And so once I receive that, And through our phone conversation, I kind of have a sense of what I might be seeing when that child first comes to me for that initial evaluation. So I'm already kind of setting the groundwork for what kinds of behaviors I might see, what really stood out in that sensory motor checklist, whether it was the vestibular system, the proprioceptive system, and these are the things that we'll talk about, the tactile system, and you kind of get a good global picture. And then when they come in, I can really take that opportunity to observe. And I think for me as a professional, as an OT, observation is like one of the biggest areas that I think is so critical across the board. So from the moment they come in, I'm already watching from how they approach the environment, what do they seek out, what do they avoid, how they move. Are they cautious or are they just like all over the place? Are they climbing up on our monkey bars already without, without, they literally just walk in and they're boom, off they go. Or are they really more cautious and hiding behind the parent? So I'm really looking at the behaviors, the motor behaviors, the emotional behaviors, the sensory behaviors from the second that they enter. Um, I do receive a lot of referrals, especially over the last several years for ADHD, anxiety, sensory processing, emotional dysregulation, and many different behaviors that the parents are just so frustrated. They don't know how to manage these behaviors despite their best effort. They've utilized many different things. Nothing just seems to work, and they're really at their wits' end sometimes by the time they come to see me. So we're really starting to peel the onion, and we have to decipher where these behaviors are coming from. Um, and it can be any one or more of the sensory systems that come into play. And so oftentimes when a child, let's say, does have focus and attention issues, we're going to start peeling the onion to see why and why they're struggling to sit in a classroom or to pay attention or to follow multi-step direction.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective, Nancy. And, I think, it speaks to the power of functional observation with a really skilled, well-experienced therapist. Simply observing an individual in an environment just tells you so much about, what's going on. So, as you said, there are many layers to the onion to peel back, and we'll peel back several of those layers, not all of them today. And I'm excited to get into that. And part of that is the hidden senses. And before we dive into those, I just want to briefly introduce the listening program to those whom it is new, because it connects directly to everything that we're going to be talking about today. So, for those not familiar with the listening program, or TLP, this is a neuroscience music-based listening therapy backed by decades of research and real-world results with over 1 million listeners so far. It features beautifully orchestrated classical and world music that's been acoustically modified with very precise changes to things like the tone, the frequency, and the timing components of sound. These subtle adjustments are designed to strengthen how all of our sensory systems work together, including proprioception, vestibular, and interoception, which are essential for regulation, movement, and learning. The music is organized into modules that first prepare the brain, then provide targeted stimulation, and then finally bring the listener back to a calm, focused state. Sessions are short, just 9 or 15 minutes long, enjoyable, and they're repeated in sequence over time, one leading to the next session in the program. This gives the brain the consistent input that it needs for lasting change or brain plasticity for that to occur. So TLP is used in the home, in classrooms, and in clinics in over 40 countries. It's helped people of all ages move through the day with more calm, sharper focus, and increased confidence so they can fully engage in life. You'll hear TLP come up throughout the conversation because it has such a powerful influence on our sensory systems, as I've shared. So let's begin with one of these systems, and one that many people maybe have never heard of, which is proprioception. So, Nancy, in simple terms, which you're so great at breaking down complex ideas into digestible information, what is proprioception and why is it important for things like coordination, our confidence, and our focus?
Excellent question. Proprioception, first of all, I love to say the word proprioception. It's just a fun word to
It's
say.
a great word.
Is really in the most simplest of ways, it's information that goes directly into our muscles, our tendons, and our joint receptors that help us know about where our body is in space and what it is that we are doing. And it's actually one of the most earliest systems to develop in utero. So if you think about that developing fetus inside the womb, and as that baby, the fetus is growing, it's receiving deep information into the joint receptors, into the muscles, into the tendons. And then as that baby gets bigger and bigger and bigger, it is just getting really good global proprioceptive input into the body. And that really sets the stage for birth and development. Um, and so it helps us also to know how much force is actually needed to do something. So, as an example, you can pick up a gallon of milk or you can break an egg, and you know how much force is needed to do those different activities without having to rely on our visual system. So, through repetition, trial and error in development, we're gaining the ability to grade how much force is needed to do something. Um, and it really is the precursor to motor planning and praxis. So without good proprioception, we can have a whole host of challenges along the way. So that's in the most simplest of terms.
Very, very well said. And you mentioned a word called praxis that is used a lot in the therapy world. Can you just maybe for those for whom that term might be new, share what that is?
Sure, it's really the ability to motor plan an action. So you receive the sensory information coming into your body. You need to have an appropriate response or output. And so one through our early years of development, we're learning how to motor plan without having to think about every action. So it's really just the ability to participate in daily activities in all the different things that we do. And I can break that down into, task analysis across the board for every single task. But one of the main factors of that is through that repetition, we learned to work through what we call a feed forward mode. So we've got our feedback, sensory information coming in, and then over time, we gradually get to that feed forward mechanism where we don't have to think about every action or look at everything that we do. We can just do it innately because we have had that practice and that skill to develop.
So when we have that feedback, feed forward mechanism working through experience, we don't have to cortically think about these actions.
That's
So
correct.
one way that we may observe proprioception is often individual, is that they are having to think through steps of actions that we should be able to do with automaticity. Would that be true?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so with that being said, I can share some common problems that we might see. Um, and so these are the kids that are not able to do things without looking. So they're having to rely on their visual system for every part of that action. They often may present with like stiff or uncoordinated movements. They might be clumsy. They're the kids that are falling frequently. They have bruises all over their body. I have kids that come in and there's black and blue marks from head to toe. And I'm like, what has happened? They just crash into obstacles in their environment, meaning that let's say you have a child with poor proprioceptive awareness and they're walking in their classroom, they're bumping into the tables, they're tripping over a backpack. They just don't have a good sense of body awareness and space. These are our kids that when they're writing, they write so hard that they break their pencil point and they're always asking to go sharpen their pencil. When they're erasing their paper, they also make holes in their paper. It's a mess. Or we may actually see the opposite where they don't press hard enough, so their coloring and their writing is so light that you can barely make out what was written. So it really does affect every single activity that we do in our daily lives. These are also the little ones in preschool that are constantly getting in trouble for hitting, biting, throw things. They trip over their peers. They're falling off their chair during mealtime. Not necessarily in preschool, but also even in our older kids. You know, they're half on the chair, half off the chair. They're very messy eaters. Food is all over the place. Um, Personal space, trouble with personal space. They're often right there in front of you. Also voice modulation, too loud, too soft. So those are the common problems that we might see, and we can talk about some strategies for those as well.
I'd love it. So maybe share a little bit from your perspective, Nancy, of where the listening program comes in to help improve proprioceptive function.
Sure. So I like to think of the proprioceptive system like a GPS for the body. And TLP helps the brain update that map and sharpen the signal so that movements can be more efficient and accurate. And so uh, it really does help the brain to process in a way that also strengthens that internal awareness by stimulating that auditory. And again, we can't separate many of the systems. We're talking about them individually, but everything is going to have an impact on the other. So, stimulating the auditory system, the vestibular system, improves how the brain receives and organizes those messages from the muscles and the joints. So then it makes it easier to know about where our body is in space, move with the right amount of force, and coordinate those actions more smoothly.
Nancy, thank you. I think that's a perfect description. A lot of what you've described, is focused on children. You're a pediatric OT,
Yeah.
but let's maybe just go a little later in life. Often through the aging process, this doesn't have to be so, but we begin to see a decline in proprioceptive ability. What's going on there? And, have you found that a lot of the same strategies that you use to help children can also be helpful in aging adults?
Absolutely. And actually, one of the examples that I'm going to use I can use it now. An adult client of mine, actually, is a personal friend. The husband had reached out to me. This was quite some time ago. She had several TBIs, just like one after another. And her sensory systems were so dysregulated. She was non-functional. And her neuropsychologist actually told the husband, go find a pediatric OT or someone that specializes in sensory integration and processing. And so he had reached out to me, and we needed to work a lot on using proprioceptive strategies to help calm her sensory systems. And it was a huge success story. I mean, amongst many other things that she did, some alternative therapies, TLP was absolutely the foundation for her being able to start tolerating um, getting her emotional system in check so that she then had better body awareness. She was then gradually started to be able to drive again, which was huge, or to be able to sit in a restaurant in a noisy environment or go to the mall. Every sensory system with her was absolutely impacted upon. But the strategies that I use, one of the main things that she used was weighted blankets, large pillows, got a large dog Had that dog lay on top of her. Her body thrived on compression and the proprioceptive input. Um, yeah,
No, that's a great example, and I love the big dog
yeah,
as a
yeah.
therapist.
The timing was perfect.
I love it.
Yeah,
So, Nancy, the vestibular system, I'd like to delve into this a bit, is best known for its role in movement and balance, but also plays a major part again in attention, posture, spatial awareness, even our emotional stability. Can you walk us through really how the vestibular system works and why it's such a foundation for so many skills?
sure. Um, and real quick, so I don't forget, can I just go back one moment
Please,
for the proprioception, just in terms of some other strategies that I wanted to just mention?
let's
And
do it.
actually, we can talk about that in our sensory diet, but just while it's fresh in my mind, the use of vibration and a vibration plate, or
Mhm.
the use of massagers, like little handheld massagers, anything with vibration, resistance, are also just really, really good strategies that can be used for both the young, very young, and also our older population as well. And so I just wanted to mention that while it was fresh on my mind, and we can talk about different strategies as we get into our conversation.
Yeah, that's great, especially the use of vibrational plates.
Yeah, they're
So
fantastic.
effective. Yeah, so diving into the vestibular system, what is it? How's it work? Why is it important?
Okay, so the vestibular system is basically our sense of balance. And again, it kind of goes hand in hand with our proprioceptive system in terms of overall body awareness, how we right ourselves up against gravity. The location are the receptors are within the inner ear, inside the semicircular canals and the otolith organs, such as our utricle and saccule. And these structures are filled with tiny hair cells that detect movement and changes in head position. So anytime that we shift our center of gravity, whether we go from side to side, or we go forward and back, or we jump up and down, or rotation, um, those hair cells and little follicles are responding and detecting those different types of movement. So the vestibular nerves send signals to multiple brain areas, including the brainstem, the cerebellum, different parts of the cortex that control movement, posture, eye stability, and even arousal levels. So it really is the foundation for so many basic skills that we need to do against gravity for the most part. And so it can impact on movement and balance. Am I jumping ahead?
No, perfect.
Movement and balance. So, being able to walk without losing our balance or tripping over things. It supports smooth transitions, meaning when I go from sitting to standing, or lying down to sitting, or standing up from the floor, whatever transition that we are making. It impacts on our posture and core stability. So it's constantly telling our brain that we are upright so that our muscles can maintain that efficient balance of flexion and extension. That's so critical, because if we turn one on or off, we have a whole host of other problems in terms of the postural system, which then affects everything else in terms of our sensory. That's why we can't separate sensory from motor. Spatial awareness works with our proprioception and vision to help judge distance, navigating around objects, and understanding where our body is in relationship to other things in the environment. Um, Eye control and reading skills. So through our vestibular ocular reflex, which is an amazing reflex within our brain, it keeps the eyes stable when our head is moving. So it's essential for tracking words on a page or following a moving ball. So you can see how with these not all working efficiently, it will impact on all the different things that we have to do from school age children on up. Um, focus and attention. So affecting our brainstem areas that regulate that arousal and level of alertness. We want to have a good ready state for focus and learning. And when that vestibular system is off, if you're feeling off kilter, if you're, like I said earlier, half off the chair, half on the chair, your body is not in a ready state for optimal learning. And that then really starts to have an impact on our emotional stability. So there's a strong core connection with our autonomic nervous system, um, where we then, if it's not working appropriately, we don't feel calm, we don't feel safe and ready to learn. So we might see an if the system is either over or under responsive, and again, it can be one way, meaning 1 minute it's over responsive and then another minute it's under responsive. And that's true for any of our sensory systems. Um, it can really start to have an impact on our autonomic nervous system and just again, our level of anxiety and motion sensitivity or sensory seeking or sensory avoiding behaviors across the board. Everything.
So, yeah, I think when people begin to understand how huge a role the vestibular system plays in our daily life, they're shocked. So you're telling me my child's reading issues might be related to my balance mechanism,
100%.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. And another piece is that it's the vestibulocochlear system, right? So that our hearing mechanism and our vestibular system are a shared system with a shared cranial nerve, the eighth cranial nerve. So there's a very close relationship with hearing, listening, and vestibular function.
Mhm.
So, given that, maybe you can share a little bit about how you've seen the listening program help with vestibular dysfunction in some of your clients, and feel free to share any anecdotal stories or case histories, Nancy.
Okay, sure. So, um, I'm going to preface that question with first recognizing the child's needs. If the child needs more calming or alerting strategies, it's important across the board that we facilitate movement in all three planes, meaning we want to be able to move in flexion, we want to be able to move in extension, and we want to be able to move in rotation. But also recognizing how is that individual initially moving and what are they lacking thereof, or afraid or apprehensive to move in a certain way. So linear movement is more calming, rotational is more alerting. Got that? Um, we build vestibular activities into their daily routine. So, I can, and again, we can talk about many of the strategies, but just as an example, rocking chairs are fantastic. And I'm talking little rocking chairs for little kids and big rocking chairs for older individuals. The video rocker chairs are fantastic. The old style ones that are like a giant floor rocker, you can get some really, really fantastic movement, posterior backward space, getting the eyes and head to move back, activating all of those different reflexes. Um, and so in regards to the listening program and how that impacts on our vestibular system. So again, strong correlation between vestibular and proprioception connection. The inner ear's vestibular system and the proprioceptive system work hand in hand to provide that balance, that movement accuracy. So by activating that vestibular system through the carefully filtered sound and bone conduction that TLP so beautifully provides, improves that brain's ability to integrate proprioceptive cues, making it easier for them to feel where their body is in space and to feel safer in terms of how they move.
Love it. Love it. And do you have, any clients that were, really dysregulated from a vestibular standpoint that
Yeah.
in a success story in your practice that you think might be helpful to illustrate what dysfunction to function can look like?
Absolutely. So many stand out, but one little girl that was born prematurely, she was born basically at 24 weeks gestation. So thinking about our vestibular and proprioceptive systems, they're forming in those very, very early stages of development. And again, that developing fetus and moving in uh, the in the sac in the sac in the fluid. I'm sorry, I couldn't think of the word. They're getting that vestibular input at such an early age, and when a baby's born so prematurely, they're missing out on, again, that vestibular and proprioceptive input. So this little girl, um, I was seeing her through the early intervention program, and she really struggled with dynamic movement and, being able to walk and being able to climb and she was a toddler at the time that I was seeing her. And so we would meet at the park, and I would have her sit on grandma's lap. The mouth is the most centrally organizing part of our body. So using the oral mechanism for sucking, for calming, so we would give her a pacifier. First, we had her facing the grandma, so she felt very, very secure. Grandma sitting on the swing. Did I not say that part? I don't think. Grandma sitting on a swing, holding the baby, very, 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 very slowly through her own natural movements, activating that vestibular system. Gradually, then turning the baby sideways and then turning the baby outward. Now, obviously, it would take time, but um, eventually we were able to get her to where she could sit on the swing or in a bucket swing where she felt a little bit more secure, and enjoy swinging. And then it really also impacted upon her other um, movement experiences, like being able to climb up on the, higher part of the playground, going down a slide. So that one was something that was one that really resonated with me in terms of when you have a little one whose nervous systems are so impacted. And another one that just comes to mind real quick was a little boy where all four ventricles were completely involved through a vacuum extraction. And this little guy, um, the only thing that would calm him was what the parents would find is putting him in the car seat on top of the washing machine and letting the vibration of the washer regulate his system. And without that, he would go into full-blown extension or full-on flexion. It was, just extreme. Any transition would throw him off. So we had to start with proprioceptive input, wrapping him in a blanket from head to toe using the calming strategies that we know from in utero. And I'll just mention those real quick. Top of the head, anterior chest, sacrum, and soles of the feet. Those are calming points.
Mhm.
And so using a blanket like physiological flexion, starting with I would sit on a ball with him wrapped up, moving forward and back, moving side to side, moving up and down. Very, very graded process. Those are two major success stories in terms, or, more drastic in terms of what we might see.
I think those are great examples, and I'm aware that interoception is something that we haven't touched on yet. And to me, it's one of the most fascinating and yet one of the most unfamiliar senses to people. So can you share what interoception is and how this impacts us day to day?
Sure. So again, in the most simplest of terms, it's our body's ability to sense, interpret, and respond to those internal signals that come from inside of us. It's often known as the hidden sense. because there are things in our subconscious that we don't always think about. Are we hungry? It's all of our internal organs, basically. So, are we hungry? Are we thirsty? Um, what is our heart rate like? What is our breathing like? Temperature awareness, sensation to pain, um, the ability or need to go to the bathroom. Do I have that sensation that I need to go or not go? And those are all part of our subconscious that in general, we don't necessarily think about in a day-to-day thing, right? Like right now, you're sitting here, you're listening to me. Now, if you have a migraine, you're not going to be able to listen to me. Your mind will be on that migraine. That will be in the forefront as opposed to it being more in our subconscious awareness. Um, and so uh yeah, that's our interoceptive system at its finest.
What does it look like when it's not functioning at its finest?
So we can have, interestingly, it really has an impact on our autonomic nervous system. So I'll have kids come in and their ears will be bright red, hot, bright red. Sometimes their nose will be red, or you'll see circulation issues, modeling of the skin, toileting issues, not being able to control their bladder or bowels, um, not feeling a sense of hunger, which then, of course, creates a whole host of other problems, or thirst. Do they need reminders that they need to eat or drink? Um, and then all of that affects their emotional states. So we can see a fluctuation of emotion. I see a lot of emotional lability, like one extreme to the other, or a mismatch of those emotions. Are they laughing when they should be sad, and are they crying when they should be happy? Those kinds of things. So,
So, this is, this interoceptive sense is so critical. And again, with all of these should function with automaticity. It's not one you can think your way to feel hungry, right? Or think
right,
yourself to thirst.
right.
So, what are tools that you use therapeutically, Nancy, to help facilitate improved interoceptive function?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think really combining all of the sensory systems, improving their overall body awareness, their balance systems. Um, we need a good balance of both those internal states and those external states. We need homeostasis across the board. And again, not necessarily separating out each of those systems to get to a better internal awareness. Um, so I would say really a combination of all of the sensory information that's coming in that helps with that internal awareness. And actually, one of the other things too is helping them recognize their emotions. So I do use, not extensively, but I do use the zones of regulation, um, and some other eh, um, resources in terms of identifying emotions, in from very simple to more complex, and helping the child register and understand where their body is at any given time. And when I say body, I mean also brain. Like, how are they feeling internally? And so I have a chart right on like a bulletin board in front of the desk where we often work. And after we do a particular activity or a sensory activity or a fine motor activity, they can look up at that chart and identify how they're feeling at that given time. Um, and I think using visuals is really an excellent way to help the child think about or have a better understanding.
Yeah. So can you, think of, a particular client where interoception was really off and, what kind of changes happened for them as that sense developed?
Absolutely. So one of my, I say this about every child that I work with, they're the cutest child. But one of my most adorable, sweet little girls, diagnosed with level 1 autism, very intelligent, highly emotional, um, but also had some learning challenges and is a sensory seeker, um, trouble with transitions, not, and many of our kids, when they don't have that sense of control, that's where we often see a lot of the emotional dysregulation and behaviors. And so we had to work through all of those sensory systems, as I mentioned, to tap into those feelings and those emotions in different situations. So um, I think one of the most important things is that the child has trust in you and they know when they get a sense, they have their own innate sense of, does this energy feel good or not good? And so making them, having them be more aware, knowing that we get them, I think is a really big part of a child feeling safe and secure. And then all the other things are going to start to fall into play. So she responded really well to all of the sensory information. They just moved to Washington State, so I'm so sad that she is now, but we're going to still obviously stay in touch. But she made huge progress in the last year through
Beautiful.
all of the sensory systems and helping that emotional regulation come into play.
Well, and right through all the sensory systems. So we've talked about proprioception, vestibular, interoception, these three hidden senses, along with the more familiar senses, of course, that we're all aware of, and they never work in isolation, right? They're constantly interacting. And one of the best ways to really support the integration of these senses is through a sensory diet. So could you, Nancy, talk a bit about, what is a sensory diet? What might it look like in the home? And what's really important for parents and fellow practitioners to understand about its importance?
Yeah. So, in the most basic of ways, when we think about a sensory diet, it's obviously not a diet of food and nutrition, although that is a part of it.
Mhm.
But we're feeding the sensory systems with what it naturally seeks out. What brings, kind of going back to our opening statement, what brings you back to a more calm, ready state? Whether it's drinking a hot cup of coffee, I find that very soothing. Is it exercise? Yes. And what type of exercise? Are you a hardcore Pilates, full force type of exercise? Or are you more yoga and more gentle movement, walking, swimming? So, a sensory diet is really developing a personalized plan of sensory activities and strategies that are going to provide the specific types of sensory input that we need to get us through our day-to-day life. And so really that's the basic understanding of what a sensory diet is. And these are strategies that can be used anywhere, anytime, any place, from home, school, car, out in public, finding those things that are going to help that individual make those transitions from point A to point B.
Nancy, how important is it to work with an occupational therapy professional to develop a sensory diet that's right for that individual?
I think it's very important. I would highly recommend that you find a good occupational therapist. And honestly, none of us are created equal by any means. So, everyone has their own niche and what they specialize in. And so, if you are out there searching for an occupational therapist, ask the questions. Um, do you, how much understanding do you have of the sensory systems? Is that something that you focus on? Or are you more just a handwriting person? There's a lot of different variables to consider when choosing the right practitioner. But I highly recommend that that be something that if you have a individual, a family member, a child, no matter what age, even if you're an adult yourself, absolutely seek out the appropriate professional advice for helping you develop an appropriate plan.
Yeah, I mean that was a bit of a setup. There are so many resources online, and that parents go and find and discover and attempt to call a program together for themselves without professional oversight and input in it. And it's so crucial that we get the right input at the appropriate frequency, intensity, and duration to make real lasting change. And that's where working with qualified practitioners
Yeah,
is so crucial.
absolutely. Yeah, and it can be very overwhelming for the family. I mean, you're researching, you're seeing all of these things out there, and it's very hard to tease the onion again and like, okay, what's going to work best for my child? And, honestly, one of the most important things is you got to do what feels right for you as the caregiver, as the parent, to say, yes, this system or program seems right. This one just doesn't seem right. And don't feel like you have to do it all. Start out small. Little steps lead to big steps and big successes.
Yeah, thank you for that. So Nancy, you trained as a provider of the listening program, well, some time ago. And I'd like to, understand from your perspective, why is it important as part of your practice?
Oh, where do I begin? Honestly, I would just start by saying I wish, honestly, that every one of my clients could do TLP. Like, I just feel so strongly about it. When I was first researching myself, like, what was the missing piece? There's something missing from my sensory world that I needed to fill that gap. And I actually became a Tomatis consultant way back in the day. And but there were some challenges with that at that time. And uh I continued my research, and I'm so happy and blessed to have found advanced brain technologies. I'll never forget my first big conference, and I was so confused. I'm like, what is this music? And I mean, like the just the whole setup and all of that can be very overwhelming if you don't know what you're doing. But it's just been such a journey for me and my practice that it's the anchor for for sensory processing and integration. Many of the strategies that we talked about can be done while listening, or like if within a sensory diet, um, because to me it lays that foundation, and it's more bang for the buck. So we lay that foundation for vestibular, for proprioceptive, for auditory, for visual, for all our everything, olfactory, the vagus nerve. Um, you know, our primitive reflexes, all of those foundational things to me gets anchored with TLP and
Mm.
where we start and how we progress through the program. Um, I use the Sound Health Library extensively in my day-to-day practice. So for those that are unfamiliar with that, there are several different albums, 10, maybe more.
Yeah, yeah.
10. And so depending on the child that's coming into the room, I will set the environment based on those albums because they're all based on beats per minute. Some resonate better than others for individuals. So just finding those right ones that work for a particular individual. I have my favorites. But for learning, for thinking, for de-stressing, for calming their central nervous system before they even, you know, when you walk into a room and you hear certain types of sound, you're either going to feel calm or you're going to feel dysregulated. And to me, the Sound Health Library helps prepare that environment.
Great. That's all great, Nancy. And thanks for sharing the additional about sound health. That's such an important daily tool just to set the right tone in the space that you're working. For the parents that are with us today that are feeling overwhelmed, they're seeing this dysfunction in their child. Things aren't coming together the way that they need them to. Just and they don't know where to start. What do you recommend as just a first step for them?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, there's so many resources that can be super overwhelming. Finding a good OT. They don't have to be certified in sensory integration by any means, but again, just that they have that whole body approach. I think really looking at the individual holistically is critical. We cannot separate head to toe and anything in between. So, really looking at the whole person and again, just finding what works best for you. So with a good support team, the use of TLP, if that is something that is doable and it's so easy and accessible in the home and on the go, are all the precursors that are necessary to help. And again, I just want to say small steps, like not to feel so overwhelmed by having to do it all.
Yeah, thank you for that. Take the first step, then the next.
Right.
So we've had lots of great questions and we've covered a lot of them in our content today. But one question that came up from Jessica is what vestibular and proprioceptive activities do you recommend while clients are doing their TLP listening?
Sure. So any kind of play in terms of, so proprioceptive, any kinds of resistive work. So while they're listening, they can be playing with, for older kids, I love using magnets. They're, they require a little bit more force with resistance and different types of magnets. So from little teeny fidget balls to more heavy duty magnet play on a magnet board, Minecraft magnet cubes. There's all kinds of different appropriate magnet toy play. Um, they can be sitting on a ball, bouncing up and down. They can be swinging for vestibular input, sitting in a rocking chair, um, in a video rocker chair where they're going to get more posterior inversion. So lots of swinging. We secure the headphones with I usually use like a tennis sweatband. It kind of holds the headphones in place if necessary, so that they can be moving. Dance. One of the things I don't even know if I mentioned was yoga. I use yoga for proprioception, vestibular, tactile, motor planning, cognitive, um, auditory, if you're using music and sound. So I use yoga from little kids all the way on up into adults. And that's and you can do chair yoga. It doesn't have to be like extreme where you're going to be losing the headphones. You can do a lot of things in a more upright position. But those are just some basic examples that we can. A hammock is fantastic. We have lots of different swings that I have in the clinic that I use, or if they're at home doing their listening, and I ask if they have, what do they have access to? And then we try to incorporate those things. A, a desk chair that's on wheels, even though it says not to be intended to be used as a toy. They make great vestibular devices. And if it's our younger kids, we might use like a blanket that we kind of secure, almost like a hammock, and we'll do some gentle rocking. You can do all kinds of movement while they're in a hammock type sling or large blanket.
Those are great recommendations. So let's go further to prevention.
Mhm.
So when a parent has their first newborn child and they're developing and they want to help them facilitate a typical or maybe even an accelerated neurodevelopment and prevent some of the issues that we've talked about, what general recommendations would you give to a new parent or an expectant parent to help help their child get the best start?
Ooh, let's see. First, lots of hugs, global types of input, meaning when, and this is, I just think about this, like making everything intentional. So when you're bathing the child, when you're feeding the child, be there, be present, have it be intentional. Toweling. I love using toweling, which basically means that when you're bathing the child and you go to dry them off, or even when you're washing the child, sometimes we're in such a hurry, we're just like, just wiping real chaotically. But if you dry or wash with a more global, meaning like more symmetrical, more calming, what do you like for your own body? What feels right? So providing just gentle strategies that are built into your daily routine, from feeding to dressing, using the fabric of going back to toweling, using the fabric of the towel from shoulder all the way down to hands, compression into the palms of the hands, little squishes, gentle input to the cheeks, kind of going back to those four calming points. When a newborn and developing baby is starting to get dysregulated, we want to kind of go back to what they felt in utero. So less is more, meaning place a hand on top of the head, place a hand on their chest, rub their feet, place their hands on their body. I show parents of newborns and little ones that where they're still holding them, how to hold their child, where they're going to get that nice input from the top of the head down to the sacrum and to the soles of the feet. Um, and so really just being more intentional with your everyday activities, singing. You don't have to have a good voice. Humming. Kids love the hum, the vibration of the voice, the mother's voice or the caregiver's voice, resonating just like bone conduction, very calming to the central nervous system. Um, am I forgetting? Oh, going back to the clothing, getting dressed, using their fabric of their clothing before you put them on, or talk about this is your shirt, these are your pants, and then um, you know, having them feel the fabric on their extremities, and then we put them on.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something maybe most important, and that is intention in every action. And I would say intention and attention, fully present. I think so often we can go through the paces, but that presence and that connection and making our children feel loved and safe and that you're home
Right.
to
Right.
them is the greatest thing that we can do
I
to
forgot one thing.
support them.
Breathe.
Breathe.
Breathing. And the baby has what's called psychic sensitivity. And so within those first 2 years of life, if you are stressed out as the parent, they will pick up on that. And
Oh,
so just if you feel yourself starting to get frustrated, you're overwhelmed, you have so many things to balance in your life, breathe.
and that's true at any stage of life with our
A
kids.
100%. Yes. Let me tell you, I was working on my breathing before this webinar.
Well, and it's it's something we may take for granted, but it is our most powerful healer.
100%.
Our
Yes.
most powerful way to self-regulate. Nancy, this has been wonderful. The hour has come and gone.
I know. I
I
can't believe it.
just thank you so much for your deep expertise, for your heart, the true love and care that you clearly have for your clients and those that you're serving. I think anyone that has gone to you as you being their occupational therapist has been very fortunate, and it's one of the reasons you're on our faculty and work with us. We saw that quality in you early on and deeply appreciate who you are and just your dedication to the work and to your clients sincerely. And for those of you that want to connect with Nancy, one of the best ways is to follow her on Instagram or Facebook at Occuplay. You can also find her on LinkedIn if you're there. To learn more, get started with the listening program, you can visit advancedbrain.com, email us at info@advancedbrain.com, or call at country code 1-801-622-5676. You can also follow us on Instagram at Advanced Brain Technologies. So Nancy, thank you again. This was wonderful. So great to have you with us, and you all make it a great day. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.